and that these kids aren't learning because they have, you know, they're struggling. Well, you know, you're talking about me. You're talking about people in the audience. The fact of the matter is, many of us grew up in poverty. I grew up in a home. I'm the first person to graduate from college in my family. But we had teachers that set high standards for us. We had the best public schools in the nation back then. We were funding them. Today, in California, we're, I think, 47th in per pupil spending, and we're not tying money to results. We're not setting the highest standards for our kids. We're not focusing on teacher training and teacher development, and we need to do a lot better job at all of that.
Make the point that standards. A lot of what has been happening under a Republican and a Democratic administration, where you set standards, you make states compete for money, is the wrong approach. But again, if local control is the best approach, why are we seeing so much failure across the country?
Well, I really do agree with the Common Core, and that's what that's about. That's been driven by governors and policymakers in all 50 states. I think there's 48 of us now that are members of the Common Core. We are competing as a country against China and India, so we have no time left, David, to worry about what North Carolina is doing compared to California. This is a country that has to do more with our kids. And I believe that it has to be local. Remember when Sam Erwin said all politics is local? Well, education is local. It starts right there, wherever that child lives, with the family that supports that child and the teacher that has that child 180 plus days a year. And why are we doing poorly? We had a conversation backstage. We have a very diverse by high standards and high expectations, and we hold teachers accountable for that. But the teachers, David, have to be part of the plan. They can't have somebody like me or the superintendent or the mayor saying, this is what you're going to do. They have to have some buy-in and some ownership, and that's what's working in our state.
Local versus federal, Chris.
All right. Local. High standards. You have to have high standards. As a school board member, I have kids in those schools. I'm talking about my children. I'm talking about the children that I see, my friends, my children's friends. We have to have high expectations for every child. I think what the mayor said is so important. We have had a system that has said that children who are poor or people who look like me aren't expected to do well in school. But it's not on the children, it's on the educators. Are we doing what we need to do to make sure that those young children succeed? So we need high standards for
but then let's be very specific. What is the appropriate federal role versus the role of a local school district, a city, or a state?
I think the local schools need to determine what is best for those children in those schools, and then we need the resources and the support, the technical support from the federal government to really make sure that we can have the capacity to do what we need. For example, in Montgomery County, we have a system of 149,000 students. Yes, we have the highest graduation rate of African American males at 74%. But let's deal with the 26% who aren't graduating. What do we need to be doing for them? How do we get the resources to get those young people who aren't engaged in their education and feeling good about it and understanding why they need their education? But that's our problem. It's not the children's problem.
But Race to the Top and Leave No Child Behind actually did transform education. It caused us all to be very cognizant that we have kids in every classroom in America that aren't performing. I was behind both of the, of course there are things you need to tinker with and fix. None of the laws were perfect. But that changed education in America. We began to understand that every kid was supposed to have high expectations and that every teacher had to be accountable. The missing link still for us, I think, in our schools across the country is how do we get parents and business engagement in making the whole thing work, because it's a community challenge.
All right, but sticking with the role of federal government, Mayor, then is local control to a point. Do you still believe in what the federal government has done under two administrations to begin a process where there are national standards, accountability standard, a way nationally to start evaluating teachers?
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
I do. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we need local control all the way to the classroom. We need to get, you mentioned it, Governor, teachers need to be involved we need to empower them. They need to be involved in decision making that affect the classroom. That doesn't mean you don't have Common Core standards. It doesn't mean you don't have Race to the Top that sets a framework. We need to empower our parents. I run about, I don't have mayoral control, as you know, but in Los Angeles, but I run 22 schools, 18,000 kids. The first thing we did early on was create a parent center in every school, a parent college, empowering parents about their rights, roles, and responsibilities. You know, the parent trigger and that whole movement started when we had to have a vote to win over some of these schools. So I do believe in local control. It's very, very important. It's critical. It's not mutually exclusive to Common Core standards or having a race to the top or leave no child behind, which was good but didn't have enough money with it, and we need a little more flexibility.
Did it have any money?
It certainly did. That's right.
Let's look at that for 1 second.
That would be nice.
The mandate that we got from the federal government with No Child Left Behind, it did a great thing in terms of recognizing every child and needing to make sure that we hold all of our children to a high standard, and it was the same standard. That was great. But on the other side, what it did for us at the local level, it has schools now fixated on tests. It had them fixated on getting children prepared for tests. What that's done for us is it's taken us away from teaching children the arts. I know for myself, if I didn't have the arts when I was in high school, I probably wouldn't have graduated from high school because I really wasn't concerned about science. I really wasn't concerned about how well I could write or arithmetic. I mean, we moved ourselves away from the broad spectrum of education that we need for children.
But aren't we misleading people to say that this is a resource issue? As you well know, federal funding for education has increased dramatically, and yet performance is flat.
It has.
So the notion that somehow we call for reforms, you got to have more money, that seems to be the old way of thinking.
No, I don't think so. I would disagree with
of resources. You have to decide what your goals are. And that's what Common Core is allowing us to do. We know what the standards are. We know what the game is. And then we each have the resources at the state level and the local level to develop the pathways that will work best in our community. Career college readiness has to be a mandate in every community in America. Our children are going to have to do more than any of us have ever done, with no disrespect of what we've done. And we have to understand that they all need post-high school training, David, and that this is something that's going to happen in their lifetime 7 or 8 times. Nobody who starts work at 22, the norm won't be that kid starting at 22 and ending at 70 with the same career. Those days are over in the world.
David, let me challenge that notion, because on the right you hear that we don't need any more money. On the left you hear that's all we need is money. I think there's a middle road, and the middle road is we've got to tie money to results. That's just a fact. I was Speaker of the California State Assembly, Majority Leader, Majority Whip. I remember, the arguments that we need to fund our schools, and we do. We're 47th in per pupil spending. When I was going to public schools in the 1960s, we were in the top 5 in per pupil spending. We had the best schools. But we've got to tie that money to results, to success. We can't continue to invest in a broken system. And in urban schools across the country, not enough of our schools are succeeding. I mean, you said a 74% graduation rate for African Americans. I don't know of a city where we have there are very few cities where we have numbers like that.
But Mayor, are you not challenging you a little bit by saying, I mean, I spent a long time with President Bush, and these folks in the front row. No, that's fine. But the point is, what President Bush always said, if you don't measure, you don't know. Now, you seem to be objecting to the notion of testing, national accountability tied to performance, tied to both money and actual, existence of schools and firing teachers and whatnot.
At a certain level. One thing, when we look at the evaluation of teachers, I do not believe that the best thing to do is to say that 50% of that teacher's evaluation, if they're highly effective, or ineffective, should be based on what children do on a test, on a standardized test. I don't believe that's the best way to go. I think we need to figure out myriad of ways to assess our children, but the other thing that we have to do, and what we've done in Montgomery County, is we have to tie the teacher's evaluation to basic standards in teaching, but then we also have to figure out how we're going to support the teachers to get better at what they do. And I think right now what we're doing is we're ranking folks, but we're not giving them the support to get better at what they do.
I don't disagree with some of that, but I'll just say this. The fact of the matter is, in most school districts, at least the urban school districts across the country, we're not principals don't even come into the classroom. It's all based on in-class observation. And if you ask a teacher, when's the last time a principal was in your classroom, the response will be, well, they come in once for 10 minutes. I agree with you. It shouldn't be 50%. It can't just be, academic growth over time can't just be based on a test. But tests are demonstrative of something.
I got you.
Mayor,
We've got to see progress. It should in-class observation, academic growth over time, contribution to the school community, student assessments. A student will tell you. You ask a kid who doesn't go to their first, who goes to their first period and doesn't go to their second. Who will go to one period and not go to the other, and they'll almost always tell you they didn't go to the second class because that teacher's putting on, a video, or they're not really learning in that class.
But it should all be about the child, David. The assessments are not about the teacher. Performance is tied to what the child does in the classroom. And the whole concept now of formative assessments, the diagnostics that are available. So I actually, if I'm a first grade teacher, understand where my pre-kindergartner is. So when that child comes into my class, I'm going to know, well, now this child reads on this grade level and counts on this grade level. And you can hold me accountable for that, for the growth and the gain that the kid makes while he's in my classroom. But it's really tough to hold a teacher accountable, as Race to the Top did, and Leave No Child Behind did, for what happened to the kid before he got there. So I believe you have to do something about holding a child and a teacher accountable to what kind of growth they gain during an academic year. That's the big difference. If I were you, Mayor, and I were a principal in L.A., I would be on the phone right now saying that was a pretty generic statement. Lots of principals are in urban classrooms, or they are in North Carolina.
Let me add another layer to this.
I can tell you that in L.A. that wasn't true. It's changing now.
I would hope so.
But it was not true. In the vast majority of our classrooms, teachers were saying they come in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and the evaluation was based just on in-class observation. There's a middle ground. We mentioned academic growth over time. I agree with you on the point that you made. Contributions to the school community should be part of it. Student assessment,
right.
But it's not just in-class observation the way it's been traditionally in most of our schools.
I want to get to the union debate, but I also want to keep our focus here where we're benefiting from local perspective, local versus national. Chris, let me start with you.
Okay.
Talk to me about just a couple of specific both challenges and results that you're seeing in Montgomery County, and how that relates to this national discussion that we are having or should be having.
Well, one thing in Montgomery County, we've talked about this, you look at the growth in our population, we are growing about 2,500 students a year. That is tremendous. That's a high school every year. At the same time, we're growing in poverty. So our rate of students who are impacted by poverty has gone to about 40%. So with 40% of our students in farms, we have more students in free and reduced meal service than DC has students in total. Those are significant challenges, and one of the things you have to figure out is how are you going to hold all of your students to high standards and make sure they meet the mark at the end of the year. That's a huge investment. That's part of what we're dealing with, and when you look at Title I dollars, we're spreading them. We're not getting more and more Title I dollars. We're having to spread them thinner and thinner. So what we decide, which is a Title I school, we're having to keep inching that mark up higher and higher, which means that those schools that may have poverty levels at 45% are not getting the resources that schools that have a poverty level of 55% have, simply because they missed the mark. That's difficult for us, and we don't have the resources for additional teachers or extra time or extra learning opportunities to keep kids after school. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to deal with, and those are the things that we've got to figure out how to partner with the state and the federal government to address.
And that's part of the reason that we all have to rethink education in the country. We know that if you're 4 years old in this country, that you should be in school somewhere learning, that your brain is red hot during those 3 and 4 year olds, but yet we as a country haven't taken on any kind of national discussion about pre-K and how critical that is to the child. And we all know that you're going to have children who are hungry or poor. but yet the community hasn't figured out a way yet in most of our communities to open those schools early in the morning and let mom or dad drop the kid off and keep those kids after school where there's computers and technology and tutors and they can learn other things, David. I've been in education 25 years now, and we still manage our day from 8 o'clock or 7:45 to 3:30. We're driven by seat time, not student time. I think the biggest thing happening in the country and the world is the transformation that technology is going to allow us to have. So you can have some flipped classrooms and blended classrooms, and I can actually get a lot of content at home at night, and then I can have teams and innovation in my classroom. But you've got to change, and we as educators and policy leaders have not taken on this whole concept of calendar.
So before I come back to North Carolina, let me go out to Los Angeles and get to the union issue because it's an issue. I mean, I go back over research for Education Nation year after year, and I say, have we gotten past, union is good, union is bad, teachers' unions are being difficult, or they're actually being part of the solution. Are we getting past this debate in your district, in Los Angeles?
I hope so.
But you used to be a union organizer, and you're still having a lot of battles.
I was a union organizer, and I still believe in collective bargaining, and I respect the role of a union in representing their members. But I think we got to represent kids too. That we got to represent parents. That parents need to be involved in decisions that impact their kids, and that kids need to be first. So there has been a difference of opinion from time to time. My hope is that we can and should collaborate more, and our new contract, our new collective bargaining agreement allows an opportunity for us to do that, where schools that are failing can come together and put together a plan, metrics-driven plan to change that paradigm. But yeah, there's no question that there have been, here's an example. When the state was cutting dramatically the number of teachers in our school district, I took on the toughest schools in Watts and East LA and the south side of the city, downtown. And I was losing 55% of my teachers. The rest of the school district was, I think, losing 6 to 9%. I went to the school district and to the union and said, help me, I can't lose 55% of my teachers. Why should our kids be disproportionately impacted because they have so many less senior teachers? Nobody listened. So I sued. I went to the ACLU. We won. We challenged seniority because it was broken. You can't have every single decision, assignments, promotions, layoffs, everything driven on seniority. I tell people, if I had run for a third term and I didn't choose to extend term limits for my city, if I'd run for a third term and said, vote for me, I've been here the longest, I mean, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work in education either. We've got to have decisions based on quality of and effectiveness of teaching. And so those are some issues we've grappled with. I'm hoping that over time, the third way, the one way says it's just reform, the other way says it's just money. The third way is you tie money to results and success. And I'm hoping that with that we can develop a grand bargain with our teachers' unions that says, I understand why you got to represent your teachers. You should have the best teachers. We should pay them a lot, but we also got to hold them accountable for success.
What do you see, Governor, as the impact of the Chicago strike?
A lot of discussion in North Carolina, national impact. As you know, our state's a right-to-work state. So we have worked always with our teachers to have a collaboration like the mayor's talking about. I don't believe that you can do it the way it's been done before. I don't believe it can be by seniority. I think it's got to be pay for performance and measures. And I think teachers are understanding that. They are in our state. We worked with them as we applied for Race to the Top. I wouldn't have submitted the application, David, had I not been able to get my North Carolina Teachers Association to sign on the form that they agreed to everything that we put in our grant proposal, which included, because of the collaborative efforts we took on, their consent, their participation, and pay for performance, and just a whole different way of, we don't call it merit pay, we call it pay for performance. They understand, just as clearly as I understand as a grandmother of little children these days, that what happens in that classroom is going to determine the outcome of my child's life. I mean, you're talking about economic development issues here, and that's why the business community has to be a part of this discussion. They are inextricably tied. Education and a good job, it goes together.
I want to take a couple of minutes.
And our economic competitiveness. This issue of education is the economic issue of our time, the democracy issue of our time, the civil rights issue of our time. When you look at the achievement gap, in California, we're going to be 1 million down in college graduates that we need because of the achievement gap. And according to Sandy McChrystal, it's also the national security issue of our time. We have got to connect this issue to the economy, to our competitiveness around the world, and to the vibrancy of our democracy.
I've got just a few minutes left, and I think I always like to ask this question because I think it's so important. I think about it in the lives of my own children, and I think about it in terms of the various tiers that we're addressing here. Because you're talking about the need for parents and their children to deal with the ravages of poverty in terms of their own educational growth. We also think in terms of, well, where kids may be achieving at a moderate level, but there's a huge achievement gap. How do we take them from one level, get to the other? What should kids actually know, and how often are we rethinking this? Each of you address that from your vantage point.
If I was to come up with a list of what they know, I don't know that I could do that. But I can say what we need to do is we need to be thinking, what are the relevant skills that young people need to be successful in society? We know it's critical thinking. We know, and this is something that I believe in most schools we just don't do well, we really need to teach our young people how to write. In this country, if it's not written, it's not relevant. We need to deal with that. And then obviously we need to deal with math. I was sitting with some young people last night, and they were talking about this project that they do where they take out a shop, basically a shop truck, into communities and have people learning with their hands how to build things. One of the things we realize is if folks know how to use math, they know formulas, but they have no idea what it means to apply it to real life.
The importance, Governor, of teaching young people how to think.
That's right.
Not just to memorize.
It's what it all is.
Right.
It's, you know, I challenge my teachers and leaders in the state to think beyond just the skill set for today. Again, David, the kids of today have got to learn all of the things you said, but they've also got to learn collaboration and team building. Yep. Almost any factory, any manufacturing plant in the country now is driven by advanced manufacturing, highly sophisticated computers. They need to be able to work in a team and figure out how to fix it so they can ship the product and be competitive globally. And so the whole world has changed. But the one thing I know, as somebody who's changed professions 8 times in my life, is that somehow I got a basic skill set of language and math and science and verbal skills that have allowed me to be adaptive in my ability to take on new challenges. And that, to me, is the ultimate criteria for what we're teaching our kids. How can they get a job, and how can they then transition through their probably 40 years, 45 years of work until they live to be 75 or 80? How can they be productive in that time period?
Right. Talk about what in a city as diverse as where I grew up in Los Angeles, what do young people going through the public school system, what do they need to know?
I think they need to be ready to work in the new economy. They need to have the skills to do that. I think they have to be college ready. I don't buy the idea that college isn't important. When people ask me how I got here, I got here because I could read and write, as you said, and because I went to college and beyond. I think it's very, very important that our kids also learn to respect and to diversity, particularly in a city like mine, but I think that's true. Cultural intelligence is important in addition to academic and emotional intelligence. I think that we need to learn to be good citizens and understand that we have a responsibility not just for ourselves but for the broader community. I think those are some of the things that I'd like our kids to know.
And the soft skill set that we don't talk much about. I'm amazed at the number of college graduates that I'm interviewing for apprenticeships or internships in my office. And they'll come in, they look like they're hungover, they have dirty clothes on, they wear flip-flops, they chew their gum. And actually one child came in about a month ago and had the audacity to answer his iPhone in my office. I thought, what kind of background does this kid have? A college degree, but no soft skills. I wouldn't hire him if he paid me.
Right. I love it. Amen. Amen to that. You know, I think one fact is worth repeating. You know, the unemployment rate for those with a college degree is 4.1%. If you are a high school dropout, it's 12.1%. I shared that with my 10-year-old. Yes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Terrific discussion. I'm going to get up and you all can find your way. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. President of NBC News, Steve Kappas.
Good job, buddy. That was a great discussion. I love the anecdote about answering the cell phone in the principal's office. I think that's probably not in the student handbook.